It began with a holiday. Two English schoolteachers, Miss Moberly and Miss Jourdain, decided to visit Paris. It was August 1901, hot, dusty, and full of adventure. On a quiet afternoon, they headed to the Palace of Versailles. Not for the history, just for a nice walk. Versailles was a tourist magnet, but that day it felt oddly quiet. They wandered through the gardens, hoping to find the Petit Trianon, the former hideaway of Marie Antoinette, small, elegant building tucked away from the Grand Palace. That's when things started to feel strange. The sun dimmed, though no clouds passed. The air turned heavy quiet, yet charged. The women began to feel uneasy, like stepping into someone else's dream. They passed two men in green coats and tricorn hats. Their outfits weren't historical reenactments. They seemed real, but their expressions were blank, like mannequins that had come to life. The women asked for directions to the Petit Trianon. The men silently gestured, no words, no smiles. As they followed the path, the mood deepened. Time felt thick, like walking underwater. Everything was too still. Then came the man with the pockmarked face. Sitting under a garden kiosk, glaring at them, Moberly said his appearance was unsettling, almost grotesque. Just ahead they spotted a woman sketching. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and an old-fashioned gown. Her hair was powdered, her look almost theatrical, but her presence felt anchored. Moberly was certain she had just seen Marie Antoinette. Not a statue, not a performer. The real queen, or so she would later claim. Suddenly, the atmosphere broke. A tour guide appeared, speaking modern French. The fog lifted, the light returned to normal. The spell was over. And the Petit Trianon stood before them, ordinary and calm. But the women felt shaken, like waking from a vivid, unsettling dream.
At night, they spoke little.
They say history repeats itself, but what about the parts we forgot? Welcome to Echoes of History, the channel where we dig up the dusty corners of the past to uncover the weird, the wild, and the wait, what? Stories they didn't teach you in school. Grab your curiosity, and maybe a cup of tea, because what you read about to hear might just change how you see the world.
But weeks later, they began comparing notes, writing down everything they remembered. To their surprise, their stories aligned with uncanny detail. Same people, same places, same strange stillness. They hadn't imagined it, not entirely. The women decided to investigate. What they found only deepened the mystery. The clothing matched 18th century court styles, right down to the buttons. The kiosk, where the pockmarked man sat, no longer existed. It had been demolished decades earlier. The pathway they walked? It didn't appear on any modern map, but old plans of Versailles showed something eerily similar. In 1911, they published a book, an adventure. It's written under pseudonyms to protect their academic reputations. It detailed their strange walk through time without apology. The book caused a quiet sensation. Some readers were thrilled. Others rolled their eyes. Critics called it a ghost story in academic clothing. Supporters called it the best documented time slip in history. Was it a shared hallucination? A momentary crack in time? Or something else entirely? The women never backed down. They insisted it was real. Not a dream, not imagination. Something happened that day in the gardens of Versailles, and they had walked straight into it. Over the years, the tale faded from the public eye, but it never truly vanished. It remained tucked away like a hidden passage in a royal hedge maze, waiting to be rediscovered. And now, more than a century later, we ask, did two women really travel back in time? Or did Versailles simply play one of its oldest tricks? Let's rewind and ask the obvious question. Did Moberly and Jourdain really slip through time? Or was something else going on? Because the story sounds fantastical, almost too neat. But here's where it gets interesting. First, let's talk about memory. Critics argue that shared memory is unreliable. Two people can shape each other's stories without even realizing it, especially if they talk often, especially if they want to believe. But here's the catch. Moberly and Jourdain wrote their accounts separately before comparing notes. Their details matched with eerie precision. It's the same path, the same people, the same strange mood. And when they returned to Versailles later, they couldn't retrace their steps. Paths were different. The kiosk was gone. The pockmarked man had vanished like a ghost. And no one else seemed to remember anything unusual that day. It was as if they had walked through a portal that had since closed. researchers began investigating. Some historians found that the costumes described matched the exact styles of 1770s Versailles. It's not generic, old-timey clothing, but court-specific fashion. The powdered hair, the tricorn hats, the waistcoat spot on. And here's the wild part. They identified a few possible historical figures. The woman sketching in the garden, some believed she was Marie Antoinette herself, known to retreat to the Petit Trianon to escape royal duties. The pockmarked man, disgraced courtier from that era with a well-documented skin condition. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe too many coincidences stacked together. Then there's the feeling. Both women described a heavy, dreamlike atmosphere, as if the world had turned muffled. No wind, no birds, just silence. Like time had paused or thinned. This sensation is reported in other time-slip cases. The disorientation, the sense of stepping out of sync with the present, as if history was just a thin veil away and you walked right through it. Still, skeptics had questions. Were the women under stress? Could the heat have caused confusion? Was it simply a mix of imagination and suggestion? Some pointed to the fact that Jourdain had a deep interest in the paranormal. Maybe her fascination influenced the story. Maybe it wasn't fraud, but wishful interpretation. Others dug into their timelines, found inconsistencies, argued that memory plays tricks especially over time, that things remembered together can morph into something entirely new. But here's the twist. Not everyone doubted them. Some physicists quietly wondered, could time, under the right conditions, fold? Could we, unknowingly, step into a pocket of the past? Could memory echo across centuries, like light from a distant star? Moberly and Jourdain never called it time travel, but they believed they had walked through a moment still alive in some hidden fold, like a loop repeating itself beneath the gardens of Versailles. And maybe, just maybe, they caught it mid-turn. Their book and adventure stayed in print for decades, quietly passed from hand to hand, treasured by believers, mocked by skeptics, but never forgotten. Became a touchstone for time-slip stories, a classic among strange encounters, and the subject of documentaries, research papers, and late-night debates. Other visitors to Versailles started reporting odd feelings, strange sensations near the Petit Trianon, echoes of laughter, flickers of figures in old clothes. Maybe it was suggestion, maybe not. But once you hear their story, it's hard to look at those gardens the same way. The palace itself holds centuries of history, layers upon layers of memory and grandeur. Could the past imprint itself on a place so deeply that it sometimes peeks through? Moberly and Jourdain believed so. They didn't care whether the world laughed, they knew what they saw. And they recorded it with the quiet conviction of experience. One thing is certain. Something unforgettable happened to them that day. And whether it was time travel, psychic echo, or dream, it still makes the world feel a little more magical, a little less fixed. And that's the power of mystery. Keeps history alive, not just in books, but in possibilities. So, what do we make of it all? A royal ghost story, historical hallucination, or a real brush with the boundaries of time? Let's explore the most popular theories. Buckle up, because things get wonderfully weird. Theory 1. The time slip. According to this, Moberly and Jourdain didn't see ghosts. They literally saw the past. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but physically walked into another era. Time, in this theory, isn't a straight line. It's more like a spiral. Occasionally, two loops brush against each other. It's for a moment, long enough to glimpse a courtier in satin or a queen sketching by the trees. Some quantum physicists don't laugh this off. They've suggested time may not be as linear as we think, that under rare conditions, magnetic, emotional, or even geographical, a fold could happen. Brief, random, fragile, but real. Theory 2. Psychic imprint. This one's a favorite among paranormal researchers. It suggests that places can record emotions, not in film, but in atmosphere. Versailles was soaked in drama. Love affairs, executions, revolutions. The psychic residue might linger, and sensitive people like Moberly and Jourdain could tap into it. Kind of like tuning into an old radio frequency. They didn't go back in time, they just heard its echo, felt the emotional film reel play again. Theory 3. Shared hallucination, the rationalists pick. Maybe they were just very tired or overstimulated. Maybe heat and suggestion worked together. Maybe they created a memory that felt more real over time. But skeptics still can't explain the accuracy of clothing details, of forgotten paths and historical characters, of the overall consistency between two separate accounts. Some even tried to recreate the walk, but the route never quite matched again. It was as if the world had rearranged itself just for them. Then there's the possibility that it was all fabricated, a hoax. But here's the issue with that idea. There was no reward. No fame, no fortune, just ridicule. Both women were academics with reputations to protect, and yet they stood by their story. For years, even as critics rolled their eyes. In fact, Jourdain continued studying the paranormal long after. She even became principal of St. Hugh's College, Oxford. Not exactly the path of a known fantasist. Moberly died in 1937. Jourdain followed in 1924. They went to their graves convinced. They had walked into the court of Marie Antoinette and come back to tell the tale. So what do we take from this story? Maybe it doesn't matter what really happened. Maybe the beauty is in the question itself, because deep down, don't we all long for proof that time isn't a trap? That the past is still out there live in corners we've yet to discover? The time slip of Versailles reminds us that history isn't always locked in books. Sometimes it breathes through the cracks in the present. So the next time you stroll through an old garden or a forgotten street, listen closely. You might hear the rustle of silk, or a far-off violin, or see a figure who shouldn't be there yet somehow is, and if you do, don't panic. Just nod politely and walk on. Maybe you'll return with a story of your own, one that makes people lean in and whisper, you know? It reminds me of those two women in Versailles, because whether or not they traveled through time, Moberly and Jourdain have certainly lasted through it. Their tale continues to charm, puzzle, and provoke. More than a century later, still wandering the halls of mystery. Just like the shadows they claim to have seen. Time is strange, people are stranger, and history, well, that might be the strangest of all. So keep your eyes open, your senses sharp, your imagination unlocked. Because just maybe, somewhere between seconds, you'll glimpse the past waving back. Until then, remember, the world is older, deeper, and more curious than we'll ever fully understand. And stories like this, they're the echoes that keep it alive.
That's it for today's Forgotten Tale. If this story made you raise an eyebrow, or to don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that dusty little bell so you never miss another echo from the past. Drop it in the comments. We're always listening for new echoes. Got a weird bit of history you think we should cover? Until next time, keep your curiosity loud and your history weird. That's it for today's Forgotten Tale. If this story made you